she stood barefoot in that hospital corridor, clutching a newborn she wasn't sure would survive the night, whispering words that would break anyone who heard them. "Tell him I forgive him." 3 months earlier, she had been picking tomatoes in her grandmother's garden. Now, she was trapped in a mansion where even the servants wouldn't meet her eyes. This is the story of how one night destroyed a girl's entire world, and how the man who ruined her became the only person who could save her. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Her name was Emma Grace, and if you had met her that summer of 2023, you would have thought she had everything figured out. She was 21, living in a small farming community in rural Tennessee, helping her grandmother sell produce at the local farmers market every Saturday morning. Emma had plans. She was saving money to attend community college in the fall. She wanted to be a nurse. She talked about it constantly with her best friend, Sarah, about how she would move to Nashville, get her degree, come back, and work at the county hospital. Simple dreams. Honest dreams. The kind of dreams that belong to a girl who wakes up at 5 in the morning to water tomato plants before the sun gets too hot. But in June of that year, everything changed because of a wedding. Not her wedding, her cousin Rachel's wedding to a man from Atlanta. A lavish affair that the whole family had been talking about for months. Rachel had somehow managed to snag herself a businessman, someone with connections, someone who promised to lift the whole family. Emma's grandmother had been invited, and because Emma was her caregiver, she went along. She wore a simple blue dress she had bought from the thrift store. She felt out of place the moment they arrived at the venue, a converted barn that had been transformed with thousands of dollars worth of fairy lights and imported flowers. Emma spent most of the evening sitting at a corner table, watching her cousin dance with her new husband, wondering what it must feel like to have that kind of certainty about your future. That's when she met him. Chase Whitmore, 28 years old, heir to a commercial real estate empire worth over $400 million. He was Rachel's new husband's business partner, attending the wedding as a courtesy. Chase was the kind of man who wore confidence like a second skin. Expensive suit, perfect haircut, the kind of watch that costs more than Emma's grandmother's house. He approached her table because, as he would later admit, he was bored. The wedding was full of people trying to impress him, trying to pitch business ideas, trying to get his attention for all the wrong reasons. Emma, sitting there alone in her thrift store dress, reading a book on her phone, seemed like the only genuine person in the room. They talked for maybe 30 minutes. He asked her what she was reading. She told him about her plans to become a nurse. He seemed interested, asking questions that felt real, not condescending. When he offered to get her a drink from the bar, she said yes to a lemonade. Just lemonade. She didn't drink alcohol. She had watched it destroy too many people in her family. Chase found that refreshing, he said. Different. They talked until the reception started winding down, and when he asked for her number, Emma hesitated but gave it to him. She figured he would never call. Men like that didn't call girls like her, but he did. The next day, in fact. He wanted to take her to dinner. Emma said no at first. She didn't have the right clothes, didn't know how to act in fancy restaurants, and didn't understand why someone like him would want to spend time with someone like her. But Chase was persistent. He promised it would be casual, somewhere she would feel comfortable. So, she agreed. Their first date was at a small diner halfway between her town and Atlanta. Chase showed up in jeans and a t-shirt, and Emma felt herself relax. They talked for 3 hours. He told her about growing up with everything, but feeling like he had nothing that mattered. His father was cold, obsessed with business, measuring Chase's worth by profit margins and deal closures. His mother had died when he was 14, and after that, his father threw himself even deeper into work. Chase had been groomed his entire life to take over the family business, but he admitted to Emma that he didn't know if that's what he actually wanted. Emma shared her own story, how her mother had left when she was 10, how her father had struggled with addiction and eventually disappeared, how her grandmother had raised her with nothing but love and hand-me-down clothes and vegetable garden dinners. For the first time in his life, Chase felt like he was talking to someone who saw him as a person, not a bank account. They started seeing each other regularly. Chase would drive the 2 hours from Atlanta to her town, and they would meet at that same diner, or take walks through the fields near her grandmother's house, or sit on the porch talking until the fireflies came out. Emma's grandmother liked him, which surprised Emma. Her grandmother was protective, skeptical of outsiders, especially wealthy ones. But she said Chase had kind eyes. Emma fell for him slowly, carefully, the way you fall for someone when you're terrified of getting hurt. She had been hurt before. There had been a boy in high school, Jacob, who had promised her the world and then left her for a girl whose family had more money. Emma had learned not to trust easily. But Chase seemed different. He remembered small things, like how she took her coffee, or that she was allergic to strawberries, or that Tuesdays were the hardest days for her grandmother, because that's when her late husband used to take her dancing. By August, they had been seeing each other for almost 2 months, and Emma was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work. Then came the weekend that changed everything. Chase invited her to Atlanta for a charity gala his company was hosting. He wanted her to meet his father, to see his world. Emma was terrified, but agreed. She borrowed a dress from Sarah, who worked at a boutique and had access to the kinds of clothes Emma could never afford. She spent an hour watching makeup tutorials on YouTube, trying to make herself look like she belonged. When Chase picked her up that Saturday evening, he told her she looked beautiful. She didn't believe him, but she wanted to. The gala was held at a 5-star hotel downtown. The moment Emma walked in, she felt every eye on her. She could hear the whispers, see the looks. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why was Chase Whitmore with someone so clearly out of place? Chase introduced her to his father, Richard Whitmore, a man in his 60s with silver hair and a handshake that felt like a business transaction. Richard looked at Emma the way you look at something you're trying to calculate the value of. He asked her what she did for a living. She told him she worked at her grandmother's farm stand and was saving for nursing school. He nodded politely, but Emma could see it in his eyes. Disappointment. She wasn't good enough for his son. She was a project, not a partner. A phase, not a future. The evening was uncomfortable but manageable until Richard pulled Chase aside for what he called a private conversation. Emma stood alone by the bar, nursing a glass of water, watching the room full of people who belonged there in ways she never would. That's when she met Vanessa Klein. Vanessa was 26, a corporate lawyer, blonde, polished, the kind of woman who looked like she had been born in heels. She approached Emma with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She introduced herself as Chase's ex-girlfriend, though she made it sound more like ex-fiancé the way she said it. Vanessa told Emma that she and Chase had been together for 3 years, that his father had loved her, and that everyone expected them to get married. But Chase had broken things off 6 months ago, right after his mother's death anniversary, saying he needed time to figure out who he was. Vanessa said she understood now. He was going through a phase. Dating someone like Emma was his way of rebelling against his father, against the pressure, against the life that had been planned for him. Vanessa advised Emma, in the sweetest, most condescending tone possible, to enjoy it while it lasted, because men like Chase always came back to women like her. Emma felt sick. She excused herself and went to the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, and tried to steady her breathing. Was Vanessa right? Was she just a phase? A way for Chase to feel normal for a little while before he went back to his real life? When she finally came out, Chase was waiting for her in the hallway. He could tell something was wrong. Emma told him about Vanessa, about what she had said. Chase looked furious. He told Emma that Vanessa was lying, that their relationship had been over for a long time, that he had only stayed with her because his father approved and because it was easier than fighting. But he was done living his life for other people. He wanted to be with Emma. He meant it. Emma wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly. So she did. If you're still watching, comment, "I'm still here, let's see who's following every twist." The rest of the night was a blur. They stayed at the gala until it ended, and then Chase suggested they go back to his apartment. Emma knew what that meant. She had never been with anyone before. She had waited. Not for religious reasons, but because she wanted it to mean something. She wanted to be with someone who saw her, who valued her, who wouldn't leave the next morning. Chase promised her he wasn't going anywhere. They went back to his place, a penthouse apartment overlooking the city, and Emma felt like she was in a dream. It was terrifying and beautiful, and everything she had imagined it would be. Chase was gentle, careful, asking her if she was okay every few minutes. Afterward, they lay in bed talking until the sun came up. Chase told her he loved her. Emma said it back. She believed him. She believed in them. But when Emma woke up late that Sunday morning, Chase was gone. There was a note on the nightstand. It said he had to go to an emergency meeting with his father, that he would call her later, and that he was sorry. Emma got dressed, called an Uber, and went back to her grandmother's house. She waited for Chase to call. He didn't. Not that day, not the next day, not the day after that. Emma told herself he was busy, that something had come up with work, that he would explain everything soon. But a week went by, then 2 weeks, and still nothing. Emma called him. It went straight to voicemail. She texted him. No response. It was like he had vanished. Then, 3 weeks after that night, Emma realized her period was late. She took a pregnancy test in the bathroom of the dollar store, hands shaking so badly she could barely open the box. Positive. She took 2 more tests, both positive. Emma sat on the floor of that bathroom and cried until she couldn't breathe. How could this be happening? They had been careful, but clearly not careful enough. Emma didn't know what to do. She couldn't tell her grandmother, not yet. She needed to talk to Chase first. She needed him to explain why he had disappeared. She needed to know if he meant any of the things he had said to her. Emma tried calling him again. No answer. She sent him a text saying it was an emergency, that she needed to talk to him immediately. Nothing. Desperate, Emma reached out to Rachel, her cousin, asking if she had a way to contact Chase or his father. Rachel was confused, said she hadn't heard from Chase in weeks, but gave Emma the number for Richard Whitmore's office. Emma called, and after being transferred 3 times, she finally got through to someone who claimed to be Richard's assistant. Emma explained that she needed to speak with Chase Whitmore urgently. The assistant asked who she was. Emma said she was Chase's girlfriend. There was a long pause, and then the assistant said, "Ma'am, Mr. Whitmore is currently on his honeymoon in Greece. He got married 2 weeks ago." Emma felt the room tilt. Married. Chase had gotten married 2 weeks ago, which meant he had been engaged when he was with her, which meant everything he said was a lie. Emma asked who he had married, though she already knew the answer. Vanessa Klein. The assistant confirmed it. Emma hung up without another word. She sat there in her grandmother's kitchen, staring at the phone in her hand, trying to process what she had just heard. Chase had used her. He had slept with her, told her he loved her, and then gone back to his real life like she had never existed. And now she was pregnant with his child. Emma didn't know how long she sat there before her grandmother found her. Her grandmother took one look at her face and knew something was terribly wrong. Emma broke down and told her everything. The pregnancy, Chase, the phone call, all of it. Her grandmother held her while she sobbed, and then, in that quiet, firm voice she used when things were serious, she said they needed to figure out what to do next. Emma didn't want Chase to know. She didn't want anything from him. But her grandmother said that wasn't how this worked. If Chase was the father, he needed to know. He needed to be held accountable. Emma didn't have the money to raise a child on her own. Her grandmother was already on a fixed income. They needed help, and Chase owed them that much. Her grandmother made the call. She reached Richard Whitmore directly, explained the situation, and demanded that Chase take responsibility. Richard's response was immediate and cold. He didn't believe Emma was pregnant with Chase's child. He said she was clearly trying to trap his son for money, that girls like her did this all the time. But Richard was also a businessman who understood risk management. He said that if Emma could prove the child was Chase's, they would discuss arrangements. He demanded a paternity test the moment the baby was born. Until then, Emma was not to contact Chase or anyone in the family. If she did, Richard would make sure she regretted it. He had lawyers who specialized in making problems disappear. Emma was devastated. She wanted to fight, to scream, to make them see that she wasn't lying, that she had loved Chase, that this wasn't some scheme. But she also knew she was powerless. What could she do? She had no money, no connections, no way to force Chase to acknowledge her. So she did the only thing she could do. She moved forward. She got a job at the local grocery store to save money. She signed up for Medicaid. She told Sarah and a few close friends that she was pregnant, though she didn't tell them who the father was. Most people assumed it was someone from town, someone who had left or wasn't in the picture. Emma let them think whatever they wanted. It was easier than explaining the truth. The pregnancy was hard. Emma had severe morning sickness for the first 4 months. She was exhausted all the time, working full shifts at the grocery store and then coming home to help her grandmother. There were nights when she cried herself to sleep, wondering how she was going to do this, how she was going to raise a child alone. But there were also moments of hope. The first time she felt the baby kick. The ultrasound where she found out she was having a boy. The baby shower Sarah threw for her was with donations from people in town who wanted to help. Emma started to believe that maybe she could do this. Maybe she didn't need Chase. Maybe she and her son would be okay. Then, in her 8th month, everything fell apart. Emma was at work, stocking shelves, when she felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. She ignored it at first, thinking it was just the baby moving. But the pain got worse, and then she felt something wet running down her leg. Blood. Emma called for help, and someone drove her to the county hospital. The doctors said she was going into premature labor. They tried to stop it, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Emma was terrified. It was too early. The baby wasn't ready. What if something went wrong? What if he didn't make it? They rushed her into an emergency C-section. Emma remembers lying on the operating table, feeling the cold air of the room, hearing the beeping of machines, and thinking about Chase. She hated him. She hated him for lying to her, for abandoning her, for leaving her to go through this alone. But she also thought about how much he had wanted to escape his life. How sad he had seemed when he talked about his father. How desperate he had been for something real. She wondered if he ever thought about her. She wondered if he knew what he had done. And then, everything went black. When Emma woke up, she was in a recovery room. Her grandmother was sitting beside her, holding her hand. Emma's first question was about the baby. Her grandmother's face told her everything. The baby was alive, but he was in the NICU. He was very small, barely 4 pounds, and his lungs weren't fully developed. The doctors weren't sure if he would make it through the night. Emma tried to get up, to go see him, but her body was too weak. She begged the nurses to bring him to her, but they said he was too fragile to move. They showed her a picture instead. A tiny, wrinkled baby hooked up to tubes and monitors. Emma stared at that picture and made a decision. She wasn't going to let him die without his father knowing he existed. Her grandmother called Richard Whitmore again. This time, Emma insisted on being the one to speak to him. When Richard answered, Emma told him that his grandson had just been born, that he was fighting for his life, and that if Chase didn't come to the hospital immediately, he would never forgive himself. Richard was silent for a long moment, and then he said he would send someone to collect a DNA sample for the paternity test. Emma said no. She said Chase needed to come himself, needed to see what he had done, needed to take responsibility like a man instead of hiding behind his father's lawyers. Richard hung up on her. But 3 hours later, Chase showed up at the hospital. Emma was sitting in the NICU, watching her son through the glass. When she saw him walk in, he looked different, older, tired. He saw her, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then Chase walked over and stood next to her, staring at the baby. He asked if it was his. Emma said yes. Chase didn't say anything for a long time. He just stood there, looking at this tiny person who was half of him, and Emma could see something breaking inside him. He asked if he could touch the baby. Emma nodded. The nurse let him in, and Chase stood over the incubator, staring down at his son. He reached out with one finger and touched the baby's hand. The baby's fingers curled around Chase's finger instinctively, and Chase started crying. Emma had never seen a man cry like that. Not loud or dramatic, but quiet, like something inside him was dying. He kept saying he was sorry, over and over again, and Emma didn't know if he was talking to her, or to the baby, or to himself. When he finally left the NICU, he asked Emma if they could talk. They went to a waiting room, and Chase told her everything. He said that after the night they spent together, his father had confronted him. Richard had found out about Emma, had done a background check on her, and had told Chase that if he continued seeing her, he would be cut off from the family and the business. Richard had already arranged for Chase to marry Vanessa, had announced the engagement to the board, and had planned the entire wedding. Chase said he tried to fight it, tried to explain that he loved Emma, but Richard didn't care. Richard told Chase that Emma was a distraction, that she would ruin his future, that men like him didn't end up with girls like her. Richard said that if Chase didn't marry Vanessa, he would destroy Emma's life. He would make sure she never got into nursing school, that her grandmother lost her house, that everyone in her town knew she was trying to trap a billionaire's son. Chase said he panicked. He thought he was protecting Emma by disappearing. He thought if he just went along with his father's plan, Emma would move on and forget about him. He didn't know she was pregnant. He swore he didn't know. If he had known, he would have fought harder. He would have done anything. Emma listened to all of this, and she felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just exhaustion. She told Chase that she didn't care about his excuses. She didn't care about his father or Vanessa or any of it. All she cared about was their son. Chase asked what she needed. Emma said she needed him to leave. But Chase didn't leave. He stayed at the hospital every day for 2 weeks, sitting in the NICU, talking to the baby, learning how to hold him, how to feed him, how to change his tiny diaper. Emma tried to hate him, but it was hard when she saw how much he cared. The baby, whom they named Cole, was getting stronger. His lungs were developing, and the doctors said he would be okay. But Emma was falling apart. The stress, the lack of sleep, the emotional toll of everything was too much. Her body was still recovering from the C-section, and she wasn't eating or sleeping properly. The nurses were worried about her, but Emma kept pushing through because she didn't have a choice. Then, one afternoon, Emma collapsed. She had been sitting in the NICU, holding Cole, when everything went black. She woke up in the hospital again, this time in a different room. The doctor said she was severely anemic and dehydrated, that her body was shutting down from stress and exhaustion. They said she needed rest, proper nutrition, and support. Emma knew what they weren't saying. She couldn't do this alone. She wasn't strong enough. Chase was there when the doctors gave her the news. He didn't say anything at first, just sat in the chair next to her bed, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Then he asked Emma what she wanted. Not what she thought she should do, not what would make everyone else happy, but what she actually wanted. Emma didn't know how to answer that. She wanted Cole to be okay. She wanted to give him a good life. She wanted to stop feeling so tired all the time. She wanted to go back to the moment before she met Chase and make a different choice. But none of those things were possible. So she said the only thing she knew for sure. She wanted Chase to take responsibility. Chase asked what that meant. Emma said it meant being a father to Cole, not just financially, but actually being there. It meant figuring out how to co-parent, even if they couldn't stand each other. It meant putting Cole first, no matter what. Chase agreed. But then he said something that shocked Emma. He said he wanted to marry her, not because he loved her, though he said he thought he had once, but because it was the only way he could protect her and Cole from his father. Richard had made it clear that he would fight Emma for custody, that he would use his money and lawyers to take Cole away and raise him as a Whitmore. The only way to stop that was if Emma became a Whitmore too. If they were married, Richard couldn't argue that Emma was unfit or that she was trying to trap the family. It would legitimize Cole and give Emma legal protection. Emma laughed. It was the most ridiculous thing she had ever heard. Marry the man who had abandoned her, the man who had lied to her, the man who had broken her heart and then disappeared. But as Chase explained the legal realities, Emma realized he was right. Richard Whitmore had power, and he wasn't afraid to use it. If Emma didn't marry Chase, she would spend the rest of her life fighting for her son. So she agreed. Not because she wanted to, but because she had no other choice. They got married a week later in a courthouse with only Emma's grandmother and a lawyer as witnesses. There was no ceremony, no flowers, no music, just paperwork and signatures and the cold reality of what their lives had become. Chase moved Emma and Cole into his penthouse apartment, though he slept in a guest room. Vanessa filed for an annulment immediately, claiming the marriage had been fraudulent. Richard threatened to disown Chase, but Chase said he didn't care. For the first time in his life, he was making his own decisions. Emma didn't know if she believed him, but she didn't have the energy to fight anymore. The first few months were hell. Emma and Chase barely spoke. They communicated through notes and text messages, coordinating Cole's feedings and doctor's appointments like business partners, not spouses. Chase threw himself into work. and Emma spent her days alone in the apartment with Cole, feeling like a prisoner in a gilded cage. She missed her grandmother, missed Sarah, missed the simplicity of her old life. But every time she thought about leaving, she looked at Cole and remembered why she was doing this. She was giving him a chance at a life she never had. Stability, security, a future. Slowly, things started to change. Chase came home early one day and found Emma crying in the nursery. Cole had been fussy all day, and Emma was exhausted and overwhelmed. Chase didn't say anything, just took Cole from her and walked him around the apartment until he calmed down. After that, Chase started helping more. He would get up in the middle of the night when Cole cried. He would make dinner when Emma was too tired to cook. He started asking her how she was doing, not just about the baby, but about her. Emma was suspicious at first, waiting for the mask to slip, for Chase to go back to being the selfish person who had abandoned her. But he didn't. He kept showing up, day after day, doing the work, proving that he meant what he said. One night, about 4 months after they had gotten married, Emma and Chase were sitting on the couch watching Cole sleep in his bassinet, when Chase told her about his mother. He said she had been the kindest person he had ever known, that she had tried to shield him from his father's coldness, that when she died, Chase felt like he lost the only person who actually loved him. He said that's why he had been so drawn to Emma. She reminded him of his mother, not in looks, but in spirit. The way she cared about people, the way she saw the good in things, the way she made him feel like he could be better than he was. Chase said he was sorry for everything, for hurting her, for being a coward, for not fighting for her when it mattered. He said he didn't expect her to forgive him, but he wanted her to know that he was trying to be the person she deserved. Emma didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said she didn't know if she could ever trust him again, but she was willing to try. Not for his sake, but for Cole's. Chase nodded, and they sat there in silence, watching their son sleep, both of them wondering if love could grow from the ruins of betrayal. Over the next year, Emma and Chase built something that looked almost like a partnership. They took Cole to the park, went to his pediatrician appointments together, celebrated his first birthday with a small party at the apartment. Emma started taking online classes to finish her prerequisites for nursing school. Chase cut back on work hours to spend more time at home. They weren't in love, not the way Emma had imagined love would be, but there was respect, there was kindness, there was a shared commitment to giving Cole the best life possible. Emma thought maybe that was enough. Maybe love didn't have to be the grand romantic gesture she had dreamed of. Maybe it could be quiet and steady and built on showing up every day. But then, just when Emma thought they had found their rhythm, Vanessa came back. She showed up at the apartment unannounced, claiming she needed closure. Emma offered to leave, but Vanessa said she wanted Emma to stay. She wanted to say what she needed to say in front of both of them. Vanessa told Chase that she had made a mistake walking away, that she understood now why he had married Emma, but that it didn't change the fact that they belonged together. She said she still loved him, that his father still wanted them to be together, that they could make it work if Chase would just stop pretending to be someone he wasn't. She looked at Emma and said that Emma had been brave to do what she did, to trap a man into marriage for the sake of a child, but that Emma had to see this wasn't sustainable. Chase didn't love her. He was only with her out of obligation. Emma felt something snap inside her. She had spent the last year being quiet, being accommodating, bending herself into whatever shape would keep the peace. But hearing Vanessa reduce her life, her son, her pain to a scheme was too much. Emma stood up and told Vanessa that she was done being polite. She said that Vanessa had no idea what it was like to raise a child alone, to wonder if you were going to have enough money to feed your baby, to watch your son fight for his life in a hospital while the man who should have been there was off marrying someone else. Emma said that she hadn't trapped anyone, that Chase had made his own choices, and that Vanessa needed to leave before Emma said something she would regret. Vanessa looked shocked, then furious. She turned to Chase and demanded that he say something. Chase, for once, didn't hesitate. He told Vanessa to leave. He said he wasn't interested in reliving the past, that he had a family now, and that Vanessa needed to move on. Vanessa didn't take it well. She left, but not before threatening to tell Richard everything, to make sure that Chase's life became as miserable as possible. True to her word, she went straight to Richard and filled his head with lies about Emma manipulating Chase, about Emma being unstable, about Emma being a bad mother. Richard believed her because he wanted to. He filed for emergency custody of Cole, claiming that Emma was an unfit parent and that Chase was being coerced into staying with her. The legal battle was brutal. Richard had the best lawyers money could buy, and they tore Emma apart on the stand. They brought up her family history, her father's addiction, her financial struggles, and her lack of education. They painted her as a gold digger who had gotten pregnant on purpose to trap a billionaire. Emma sat through it all, trying not to cry, trying to stay strong for Cole. Chase fought back. He testified that Emma was a good mother, that she had done everything on her own while he had been too cowardly to face his responsibilities, that Richard's claims were baseless and cruel. He brought in witnesses, doctors, and teachers from Cole's daycare, all of whom said Emma was devoted to her son. The judge, a woman in her 50s who had seen too many custody battles, listened to everything and then made her ruling. She said it was clear that this case was not about Cole's well-being, but about control. She said Richard Whitmore had no standing to claim custody of a child who had two fit, loving parents. She dismissed the case and warned Richard that if he filed frivolous motions again, she would hold him in contempt. Emma felt like she could breathe for the first time in months. But the fight had taken its toll. Emma was exhausted, emotionally drained, barely holding it together. One night, after putting Cole to bed, she went into the bathroom and locked the door. She sat on the floor and cried. Not the quiet tears she had gotten used to, but the kind of sobbing that comes from a place so deep you didn't know it existed. She cried until her throat was raw, until she had no tears left, until she was just sitting there shaking. She heard a knock on the door. Chase's voice asked if she was okay. Emma couldn't answer. She couldn't pretend anymore that she was strong enough for this. The door opened, she had forgotten to actually lock it, and Chase came in. He didn't ask questions. He just sat down on the floor next to her and waited. After what felt like hours, Emma finally spoke. She said she couldn't do this anymore. Not the marriage, not the fighting, not the pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. She said she felt like she was drowning, like every day was a battle just to keep her head above water. Chase listened, and then he did something Emma didn't expect. He told her she was right. Chase said they had been doing this all wrong. They had built their entire relationship on obligation and guilt and fear, and that wasn't fair to either of them, and especially not to Cole. He said Emma deserved to be happy, to have a life that was hers, not one that was forced on her by his father's threats and legal battles. Chase said he wanted to start over, to do things the right way. He suggested they separate, not divorce, but create some space. Emma could move into her own place nearby, somewhere she felt comfortable, somewhere that felt like home. They would co-parent Cole properly, with a real schedule and real boundaries. And if, after some time apart, they decided they wanted to try again, it would be because they chose each other, not because they had to. Emma was surprised by how relieved she felt. She had been so afraid that asking for space would mean losing everything, but Chase was offering her a way out without abandoning Cole. They spent the next few weeks making arrangements. Chase bought Emma a small house in a quiet neighborhood, close enough that Cole could go back and forth easily, but far enough that Emma had her own space. He set up a generous support system, not as a payment but as a commitment to their son's future. Emma started therapy, something she had needed for a long time but had been too proud to ask for. She began to heal, slowly, finding pieces of herself that she had lost in all the chaos. Over the next 6 months, Emma and Chase figured out what co-parenting actually looked like. They had dinner together once a week with Cole, kept their communication respectful, and showed up for every milestone. Emma enrolled in nursing school and discovered she loved it even more than she had imagined. Chase started going to therapy too, working through his issues with his father and learning how to set boundaries. Richard tried a few more times to interfere, but Chase shut him down each time, eventually cutting contact completely when Richard refused to respect their family. One evening, Chase came to pick up Cole and found Emma in her kitchen, wearing scrubs, exhausted from a clinical shift, but smiling. She looked different, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. Chase asked her how she was doing, really doing. And for the first time in 2 years, Emma said she was happy. Chase told her she looked beautiful, and Emma realized he meant it. Not the way he had said it at that gala, trying to make her feel better, but genuinely. They talked for hours that night after Cole went to sleep, not about their past or their mistakes, but about who they were becoming. They took things slow, coffee dates while Cole was at daycare. They walked in the park where they had taken Cole for his first steps, movie nights that felt like first dates all over again. Emma made Chase earn her trust back, piece by piece, and Chase showed up every single time. He didn't rush her, or pressure her, or make promises he couldn't keep. He just proved day after day that he was different now. That they both were. On Cole's 3rd birthday, surrounded by Emma's grandmother, Sarah, and a few close friends in Emma's backyard, Chase asked Emma if she would consider trying again. Not going back to the way things were, but building something new together. Emma looked at their son, happily covered in birthday cake, and then at Chase, this man who had broken her heart and then spent years putting it back together. She said yes, but on one condition, that they promised to always be honest with each other, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. Chase agreed. They didn't get remarried right away. They dated for another year, went to couples therapy, had hard conversations, and worked through their trauma together. When they finally did renew their vows, it was in Emma's grandmother's garden, the same place where Emma had been picking tomatoes the summer she met Chase. It was simple and genuine, and everything their first wedding hadn't been. Emma wore a dress she picked out herself. Chase wrote his own vows. Cole, now 4 years old, served as their ring bearer and stole the show. Emma eventually became a registered nurse and worked at the county hospital, just like she had always dreamed. Chase scaled back his involvement in the family business and started a foundation helping young parents in difficult situations, inspired by Emma's story. They built a life that was theirs, not anyone else's, filled with ordinary moments that felt extraordinary because they had fought so hard to get there. Years later, when people asked Emma about her story, she would tell them it wasn't a fairy tale. It was messier than that, harder than that, more real than that, but it was hers. And in the end, that was enough. If this story touched you, let us know in the comments what part resonated most. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about resilience, redemption, and the complicated beauty of second chances.